Overall, what do you have to say for what Mr. O'Toole is saying, what CSIS told him, saying that even after he leaves Parliament, he's going to be an evergreen target of the Chinese government?
First, I'm glad that Mr. O'Toole has been briefed. I think this is a direct function of the action that our government is taking through a number of initiatives which have been laid out in the CSIS annual report of 2020. It's also, I think, a reflection of the benefits of the ministerial direction that I put my signature to about a week and a half ago. But foreign interference is not a new threat to our national security. The government has been talking about it for years. That is why we put in place new powers and authorities for our national security establishment to protect those who may be the target of foreign interference, including through Bill C-59, including by adding new mechanisms of transparency, and we'll continue to work with all parliamentarians to make sure that they get the information and the support and the tools that they need to protect our institutions from foreign interference.
You raised the issue that we've heard come up time and time again that it's like this has been going on since before 2021. Why are parliamentarians just finding out now? Is it the fact that your office didn't know, or was the information not being shared?
Well, what I can tell you is that as the CSIS report laid out, that the service has been very proactive in engaging federal parliamentarians and will continue to be going forward. And since I have taken on the responsibilities as Minister of Public Safety, have been driving forward with the reforms to improve the internal rigors around the governance and flow of intelligence and information. I would point to the ministerial directive as a reflection of that commitment. I would also say that we're acting on two concrete recommendations which were put forward by the Committee of Parliamentarians on National Security and Intelligence through the creation of the National Coordinator to Fight Against Foreign Interference, as well as moving forward with the creation of a Foreign Agent Registry. We just concluded an important public conversation with Canadians across the country on how best to create that tool. And I think in a lot of ways that exercise, the exercise of having a public consultation to inform the creation of a new tool, is very much compatible with the charted course forward that Mr. Johnston has prescribed through public hearings, because it puts the community at the center of these conversations. And by doing that, we can engage Canadians and make sure that we are fighting foreign interference together.
The fact that the NDP is calling on David Johnston to step down, I mean, doesn't that suggest that everybody is losing faith in this process you've put in place?
I think there will be efforts to continue to malign Mr. Johnston, which are deeply regrettable, mostly which are being advanced by Mr. Poilievre. What he should be instead focused on doing is taking the briefing. And we have gone out of our way and will continue to offer him a briefing to the highest classified levels to ensure that he's got the same access to information that Mr. Johnston had access to, that the site panel and the two panels that were there to ensure the integrity of the elections in 2019 and 2021 had access to, so that he and the Conservatives can have an informed discussion about how to protect our democratic institutions from foreign interference. That's what a serious leader of a political party would do in this instance. Instead, he is refusing to take the briefings, claiming that he's being silenced. He's silencing himself. So instead, he should take the briefing.
The problem with all the other parties has nothing to do with your process?
We're prepared to work with all parties, but the first step is to equip yourselves with the classified information that we are offering. And the Conservatives won't take for a yes for an answer. That's a problem.
How will you vote on the NDP motion today?
Well, I mean, we're still having conversations with the New Democrats and with other parties. We're very committed, as we have been throughout this process, to be able to work with Parliament to get answers on questions related to foreign interference and to find the best path forward.
Do you believe that Mr. Johnston is the right person to hold the public hearings, given the questions around his credibility and potential conflicts of interest, both with Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, and with China?
Well, I certainly don't have any question about Mr. Johnston's credibility. He's somebody who served this country with distinction for his entire life, and I think, frankly, it's a little disappointing the way in which he's being personally attacked.
I think that's
well. What I think we have to continue to do is to remember what the problem is here, and the problem is that we have foreign actors in foreign nations that are trying to undermine Canadian democracy. That is a problem not for the Liberal Party, that is a problem for every party, and a problem fundamentally for our democracy. And what we've said throughout this process is that all parties need to work collaboratively to deal with national security documents and deal with facts that there's
So
information. Well, I think that we have a number of processes, whether or not it's NSI COP, or I could take a look at what we did with Winnipeg Labs, where we've been able to talk with opposition parties and find solutions. So as I do in all of these, well, the reason you're not hearing an answer is because we have to keep.
But what's
we
your
have to keep
personal
talking.
opinion? I understand you have to negotiate with other parties, but what is your opinion on whether Mr. Johnson can stay on?
My opinion is that the most important thing, and that's why I pull it up to a top level, the most important thing is that Canadians have confidence in the security and intelligence system, the way in which we deal with information. Well, yes, I do believe Canadians have confidence in Mr. Johnson. I think that he is somebody who's, whether or not he was asked by a Conservative Prime Minister or a Liberal Prime Minister, has served this country admirably in a number of different ways. And let's ask the question of what he was asked to do. He was asked to look at information, confidential information, that cannot be released to the public, and make a determination as to whether or not there were things there that should have been released or were inappropriate. And his report, I think, was fulsome. And I think the question now is that when we have China and Russia and other actors who are trying to undermine our democracy, how do we as parliamentarians set aside our differences and find a way, as we did in Winnipeg Labs, to be able to make sure that Canadians know definitively that security and intelligence is being appropriately handled.
Is that the kind of solution you're seeking, to do a Winnipeg Labs committee type of
No, I just
Johnston path forward?
I think what I'm saying is that was a good example, separate and apart. I'm not necessarily saying that outcome would be what would be chosen, but I think it was a good example of somewhere, if you recall, on a national security issue where a lot of the facts and details were not able to be released to the public, where we worked over a very long period of time to be able to find a solution where all parties were able to agree. And now all parties are participating in a process that they agree is fair and reasonable and getting at facts. And I think what happened with Winnipeg Labs is there was a movement of time where the emotion got pulled out of it, where logic and reason pervaded, and where eventually the Conservatives and the Bloc came to the table and participated in a process. What I'm saying is the spirit of that, the spirit of putting the interests of the nation first, setting aside partisan differences, talking about practical solutions as opposed to trying to seek partisan advantage, is the type of conversation that we need to be having.
But isn't the point?
So the motion is not binding on the government if it's passed by all three parties, which is supported today, opposition parties. So in that case then, are you saying that the government position would be that motion isn't even perhaps in any way morally or ethically compelling to the government to adhere to?
Well, I think we take our conversations with parliamentarians very seriously, and our conversations with Canadians. We just spent a week in our ridings. You know, I had town halls, I had events, I had things that I was going to, talking to folks at my riding and elsewhere, and so all of this we take very seriously. I don't want there to be any outstanding questions. I want as much as we can, and this is difficult with something that's shrouded
on the
in.
Motion, sir. On the motion,
I understand.
Are you going to abide by it?
Well, look, I mean, you're asking me, and this is what I'm trying to explain, okay? So why do I pull back when you ask such a specific question? The reason I pull back is because there is and this happens many times when I scrum here, where you're asking me about an event in real time and what I might do, when that conversation is ongoing and iterative, and I want to be protective of those conversations, because what we've been able to do in other places, in many places, is to be able to find consensus and to be able to find, including consensus in many instances where it was thought to be impossible. But so if I take clear and unambiguous positions in the middle of trying to have conversations with the opposition, I don't think that's helpful.
So I think you're having conversations with them right now that would adjust this motion?
No, we're having conversations about foreign interference every day, and those conversations about foreign interference
that the opposition parties unanimously oppose.
Right.
So you are on the wrong side, according to the majority of the House, not the other way around.
Well, I mean, I think that I point to many examples where there's a disagreement between ourselves and the opposition parties, and we continually negotiate with them to try to find an answer. I'm just trying to tell you what I'm committed to, which is committed to try to ensure that all Canadians can feel assured that the processes that we have to have surveillance and oversight of our national security, to make sure that redactions that take place are appropriate, that information is shared appropriately, that is something that Canadians can have confidence in.
You don't think
and that is.
You don't think
I absolutely don't think the train's left the station. I think it's important to recognize that Canada is, when it comes to handling its intelligence, is in the top class of the world. It's why we're a member of the Five Eyes. Do we have different disagreements, and are we dealing with some of the most difficult times that we've dealt with since the Second World War? Absolutely. We're dealing with actors in China and Russia who are using new methods and new ways of attacking our democracy. We have to adapt, we have to move, but we also have to be very careful to stop politicizing this. I think that trying to seek political gain in every conversation is unhelpful. Look, this is something that is a lot bigger and a lot more important than the normal thrust and party of partisan politics. But I got to get in there. Thanks so much.
Soumise au vote cet après-midi, tous les partis d'opposition sont en faveur. Ça risque de passer. Vous, les libéraux, est-ce qu'il y a une décision sur comment vous allez voter?
C'est clair que nous nous opposons à cela. Il est certain que nous maintenons qu'il y a eu un examen de fait et nous allons évidemment approfondir nos efforts en ce qui concerne l'interférence étrangère.
Mais quand vous avez trois principaux partis qui disent qu'il n'y a plus d'affaires là, M. Johnston, quelle légitimité vous avez, vous, de regarder là?
On s'attend quand même à un certain sérieux des partis de l'opposition. On voit qu'il y a deux des chefs de l'opposition qui osent même pas aller lire les documents sur lesquels M. Johnston a basé ses jugements et ses observations. Donc, il y a quand même beaucoup de politique qui se joue sur un enjeu aussi sérieux. Nous déplorons cela et évidemment, on va continuer d'approfondir nos efforts dans le sens.
Mais pour M. Singh, il accepte d'avoir ce meeting, donc vous ne pouvez pas dire la même chose. Et lui, il a joint sa voix aux autres. Donc, est-ce que ça ne change pas la donne?
Et oui, j'applaudis le fait que M. Singh ait décidé d'approfondir ses connaissances en la matière et je suis certain qu'ayant fait ça, il va porter un jugement probablement un peu plus éclairé sur le sujet.
Mr. MacKinnon, at some point do you need to read the room and see that you don't have the support of Parliament to continue with Mr. Johnston?
What I've done is read the room and see two opposition leaders who refused to even consult the documents upon which Mr. Johnston based his observations and his conclusions.
But their MPs are. Like, the parties will see the documents in the end.
Yes, NSICOP will, and NSICOP has a great role to play, and unfortunately we've even seen some of the parties be very dismissive of that. Unfortunately, what you're seeing right now is a lot of politics being played with a very serious issue, an issue the government takes extremely seriously and upon which we're going to benefit.
So Johnson is saying...
So the party leader who's propping up your government and has agreed to see these documents is the one bringing this motion forward. Like, what does that tell you? We're going to see a majority of MPs say, yeah, we want to fire David Johnston, including the guy who is willing to see the documents and play ball with the government.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that Mr. Singh has made that decision, and I think once he sees and expands his knowledge of this issue, I'm sure that you'll have to go back to him and check for an update. But for right now, we have invested a great deal of time and effort, and we will continue to in the issue of foreign interference. And I'm very, very hopeful that we'll continue to approach this in a multi-partisan way and not with some of the politics that we've seen today.
Justement, le fait que...
Yeah, Stellantis. Hey, listen, we're negotiating with the company. Like I said, for me, this is pretty usual. You know, I have a number of companies who want to invest in Canada. That's my daily jobs, negotiating, and I would say negotiations are progressing. But bottom line, you know, I want to get a good deal for our auto workers. I want to get a good deal for the auto industry, and I want a good deal for Canadians. So that's what we're doing. And like I say, talks are progressing, and we'll get to a deal. But we want a good deal for Canada.
Quels sont les risques qu'il n'y en ait pas de deal, que ça tombe, tout ça?
Non, écoutez, c'est normal. Vous savez, moi, je fais ça tous les jours. Rendu à mon âge, là, ces choses-là, on est habitués. Nous, là, on négocie avec plein de gens qui veulent venir investir. On arrive de la Corée, on a des gens du Japon. Les gens voient au Canada 5 choses qui sont importantes. Ils savent qu'on a les talents, ils savent qu'on a les écosystèmes pour les accueillir, qu'on a les minéraux critiques, on a l'énergie renouvelable, on a l'accès au marché. Hier, vous avez vu GM POSCO qui s'installe justement au Québec, un projet important. GM qui revient au Québec après 20 ans. Le Québec qui rentre par la grande porte dans l'industrie automobile. Alors, c'était un grand moment hier, mais je peux vous dire, les gens regardent le Canada maintenant, c'est plus maintenant pourquoi le Canada, c'est comment. et quand. Alors, ce que je peux vous dire, pour moi, ces négociations-là sont normales. On va avoir un bon accord pour le Canada, puis c'est ça qu'on est en train de négocier.
Il y a trois partis d'opposition maintenant demandent que David Johnston se retire de son rôle de rapporteur spécial. Trois partis d'opposition. Est-ce que c'est pas le temps, à un moment donné, de dire qu'il faut que M. Johnston laisse sa place pour une question?
Écoutez, moi, je focalise sur le rapport qu'il a émis. Je pense que c'est un Canadien respecté. Et je pense que l'idée derrière ça, c'est que le rapport indique la voie à suivre. Et c'est là-dedans, moi, je pense qu'on devrait continuer. Mais je peux vous dire que la préoccupation des Canadiens et des Canadiennes aujourd'hui, pour avoir passé pas mal de temps hier avec pas mal de gens, les gens me parlent évidemment encore d'inflation, ils me parlent du coût de la vie, puis ils me parlent d'investissement. C'est ça qui préoccupe les gens.
La question, c'est que le vote va sûrement passer. Juste finir.
Step down as special rapporteur in English. What do you say to those calls for him to step down?
Well, I'd say, listen, what really matters for me is the report that he published, which provides a way forward. And I think that's what we will continue to follow, his recommendations. I would say, having spent time with Canadians yesterday, were a big announcement. Canadians focus on cost of living, they focus about inflation, they focus about investment. We have a way forward with the report, and I think that's what really matters.
Juste là-dessus, il y a le vote, juste le vote.
Alberta government. I mean, what is your message to them if they want to get these kind of deals that you're signing with Alberta?
Listen, I've worked with all of them. I spent a week in BC. We announced Absalom a $1 billion, $700 million, which would be invested in the BC biotech industry. We were there for the Lululemon headquarters. As you know, Lululemon is anchoring its headquarters. We'll recruit, 2,600 people. We already did a lot of good things in Alberta. You may have seen that the first hydrogen plant is in Edmonton, the largest one in North America. We have another project in Fort Saskatchewan, which is, which we're looking and pursuing with Dow Chemical. So there's a lot going on in Alberta, and certainly we'll be there to support because I think it's a very attractive jurisdiction for people to come and invest.
Sur Johnston, le vote, il va y avoir un vote. Tout indique que ça va passer puisque les trois partis sont d'accord. Est-ce que vous voyez ça comme quelque chose qui va vous forcer la main?
Non, le Parlement est souverain. Les gens vont voter de la façon qu'ils désirent. Nous, ce qui compte comme gouvernement, c'est d'aller de l'avant. On a un rapport, il y a des recommandations, puis moi, je pense que c'est la voie à suivre.
Donc, vous ne suivrez pas la motion?
Les gens voteront. Je ne veux pas prédire du résultat d'une motion. Les gens vont voter avec leur conscience, avec ce qu'ils pensent. Mais d'un autre côté, nous, on a un rapport, il y a des recommandations, pour aller de l'avant là-dessus.
Mais juste être clair.
Your government wants them to put up more money. Are they doing that right now?
Well, I would say we've been, and I've seen a lot of press over the last few days. I was in Korea, I was in Vancouver. Listen, we've always worked hand in hand with our colleagues in Ontario, and that's the way to attract these big investments. And what we said last week was for the Ontario government to pay its fair share, and they came to the table. So that is allowing us to progress the discussion. That's why the discussions with Stellantis are ongoing as well.
Sur la motion qui va être votée pour le retrait de M. Johnson, c'est quand même le NPD, c'est quand même le parti qui est partenaire de votre parti. Alors, est-ce que ça change quoi que ce soit la donne? Parce que là, vous semblez dire, il y aura un vote, on va peut-être
la Chambre est souveraine. Non, la Chambre est souveraine. La Chambre s'exprime souvent dans des motions. Vous savez, il y en a une par semaine au moins ou deux. Alors, la Chambre s'exprime avec une motion, mais nous, comme gouvernement, notre réalité, c'est de gouverner, c'est de prendre le rapport, aller de l'avant avec les recommandations.
Mais à un moment donné, M. Champagne, vous demeurez minoritaire. Est-ce que vous pouvez vraiment exprimer tout le monde?
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de cette motion du NPD qui demande le retrait de M. Johnston? Vous avez trois partis d'opposition maintenant qui demandent le retrait de M. Johnston. À un moment donné, si le Parlement vote pour ça, ce qu'on présume qu'il va arriver, il ne faut pas penser qu'il faut écouter tout ce que le Parlement dit, que vous êtes en situation minoritaire?
Bien, ça me permet peut-être de résumer pour commencer un petit voyage que j'ai fait dans le nord de l'Ontario la semaine dernière. J'étais dans le nord de l'Ontario pour célébrer les investissements du plan des langues officielles pour les communautés francophones hors Québec en matière de santé en particulier. Donc, j'ai beaucoup apprécié ce que j'ai entendu et je pense que les gens ont beaucoup apprécié aussi les investissements qu'on va faire pour donner accès aux francophones du nord de l'Ontario à des services de santé davantage en français. Une autre annonce qu'on a fait aussi, c'est une annonce pour lutter contre le VIH et contre l'hépatite C, dans un contexte où les maladies transmises par le sang et sexuellement font des ravages de plus en plus importants dans la communauté du nord de l'Ontario. dans un contexte aussi de lutte contre les drogues toxiques. Et à ce sujet, je salue la rencontre qui va avoir lieu ce matin entre des organismes qui luttent contre cette crise des drogues toxiques dans un contexte où il faut éviter malheureusement la désinformation qui fait mal aux communautés et aux individus. Et finalement, j'étais aussi à Québec, et j'arrive à votre question dans quelques instants, à Québec là, pour annoncer le lancement des travaux pour l'Institut nordique et le lancement du Carrefour international Brian Mulroney. Maintenant, sur la question de l'ingérence étrangère, bien, comme vous l'avez entendu, on aura une motion et un vote sur cette motion bientôt. On va voir ce que les gens vont faire, les députés vont faire à la Chambre, mais c'est clair que c'est une préoccupation importante pour les gens. C'est clair aussi que le gouvernement canadien a un plan pour à la fois informer et rassurer les Canadiens, et ça passe par les mesures qui ont été déjà annoncées, puis on verra s'il y aura d'autres mesures.
Que vous, la voix des parlementaires, s'il y a 3 partis d'opposition qui vous disent « cet homme-là n'a plus d'affaires là, on n'a plus confiance en lui, n'a plus la légitimité pour agir », alors quelle légitimité avez-vous pour le garder en place?
Bien, on verra quelle sera la voix des parlementaires, et 2, on verra quelle sera la décision qui sera prise, y compris par le gouvernement canadien et par M. Johnston. Mais c'est sûr qu'il faut tout d'abord entendre la voix des parlementaires et pouvoir statuer par la suite pour ce qui va être fait pour à nouveau informer, rassurer les Canadiens et pour lutter contre toute forme d'ingérence.
Mais M. Duclos, on sait déjà que la Chambre à majorité veut d'une enquête publique. On le sait déjà. Ils ont voté comme ça au mois de mars. On le sait que les 3 partis veulent une enquête publique. Donc, je suis pas sûre que ça fonctionne de dire attendons le vote. À un moment donné, vous êtes un gouvernement minoritaire. Est-ce qu'il ne faut pas prendre acte de ce que vous demandent les 3 partis d'opposition à majorité?
La Chambre s'est déjà prononcée sur le souhait des partis d'opposition d'avoir une enquête publique. La Chambre va se prononcer prochainement sur le rôle de M. Johnston pour la suite des recommandations qu'il a formulées dans son rapport. Et on va devoir attendre le vote de la Chambre. Mais c'est clair que jusqu'à maintenant, M. Johnston a joué un rôle important pour informer et rassurer les gens dans un contexte qu'on sait être très complexe. Un des objectifs étant de protéger la sécurité des gens qui travaillent dans le domaine du renseignement à l'échelle du pays. Donc c'est un rôle qui est délicat, un équilibre qui est particulier à atteindre, et on va voir ce que la Chambre pense des prochaines jours.
Émilie, dernière question. Émilie, s'il vous plaît. Émilie, posez après ça
La motion, elle dit dans son texte que vous avez ignoré une motion pour voter à l'unanimité pour une enquête parlementaire. Donc, ça ne témoigne pas quand même d'une insatisfaction du Parlement envers votre gouvernement minoritaire, et ça ne témoigne pas d'une crainte que, encore une fois, vous pourriez éviter le résultat. Qu'est-ce que vous répondez à ça?
Bien, c'est une très bonne question. Il y a 2 contextes différents. Le premier, c'est celui que vous avez mentionné, que nous sommes dans un gouvernement minoritaire et que le gouvernement ne contrôle pas les points de vue de l'opposition. Et c'est la responsabilité de l'opposition de dire ce qu'elle pense. Mais la deuxième chose, c'est que le gouvernement est le gouvernement. Le gouvernement a des responsabilités à assumer, y compris celle de la protection des renseignements qui pourraient nuire à la capacité des institutions de renseignement à travers le pays, y compris le personnel de ces gens, de faire leur bon travail. Oui, l'opposition a son rôle à jouer. Comme vous l'avez dit, dans un contexte de gouvernement minoritaire, le gouvernement ne contrôle pas le résultat des motions à la Chambre, mais le gouvernement doit faire ce qu'il doit faire, ce qu'il va continuer à faire pour protéger la sécurité des gens qui travaillent pour la sécurité du pays.
In English, on the Opposition Day motion, there are calls to dump David Johnston as a special rapporteur. Why does your government still think he's credible in this position, and should you cut your losses?
Well, again, I said that briefly in French. I'll repeat that in English. There are 2 contexts in which we are operating. First, a minority government, which is obviously key to deciding what the majority of MPs will decide in the House. And second, the role of the essential role of the government, which is to protect the safety of people, including those that work for intelligence services in our country. So the House will vote today on a motion, and it's fine and perfectly all right that the opposition may decide that Mr. Johnson should not continue his position and his functions. This being said, the government also has a key responsibility, despite of its minority status in the House of Parliament, to determine the type of action that will be needed to support and to protect the safety of Canadians across Canada.
Okay, merci.
We've been working with the Alberta government. This last year, we renegotiated the OPPS, so the pricing system in all of the provinces, including with Alberta. The Minister of Environment, Minister Savage, was at COP15 working with us on the nature agreement. So we're going to continue working with the Alberta government as we've had over the past few years.
But the Premier last night said declaratively Alberta should stand shoulder to shoulder against your policies. And they're in particular opposed to your electricity standard for 2035. They're opposed to the oil and gas cap for 2030. So how are you going to get your agenda through with a provincial government that controls that sector that doesn't agree with you?
In 2016, the Alberta government committed to eliminate coal-produced electricity by 2030.
I believe that was a Notley government.
And that has continued under the two successive premiers in Alberta. And Alberta will eliminate coal electricity production not by 2030.
Right, but they just invested in natural gas, and now you want to phase out the natural gas.
They have pursued under this policy, under, yes, previously an NDP government, but they've continued under a Conservative government. And so I'm confident that we will be able to work our differences out with them, and as we've done on other issues like pricing, for example.
And so when will we see your emissions cap, sir?
Mr. Guilbeault, David Johnston.
Good morning, Mr. Wilkinson. How do you see yourself working with the government of Alberta to impose, all of your signature climate policies that are coming down the pipeline?
Well, I mean, first let me say congratulations to Premier Smith, and certainly I look forward to engaging with her on a range of different things. I would say that, in my view, Albertans, having grown up on the prairies, Albertans are no different than other Canadians. They believe in climate change and the importance of addressing it, but they want to do it in a smart way, in a way that recognizes economic realities and looks to build on the opportunities for the future. I look forward to engaging with Premier Smith on how we can build a strong economy for Alberta and a strong economy for Canada.
But they disagree on all of your targets for the oil and gas emissions cap, for electrification in 2035, and they want it shifted to 2050. So how do you achieve your agenda when so much of it goes through Alberta?
Well, look, I mean, Canada works best when Canadians work together. I'm going to approach the conversations with Premier Smith and her new cabinet with an open mind to have a conversation about how we can actually work together. I think I just introduced into the House of Commons amendments to the Offshore Act, which is a good example of collaboration with provinces on the eastern coast of Canada about how we enable offshore wind and hydrogen in a way that's going to build economic opportunity for the future. I look forward to talking to Premier Smith about critical minerals and hydrogen and a whole range of opportunities for Alberta.
Is the emissions cap going to be shifted? It's already delayed. Is it going to be shifted beyond 2030? Even the industry says it's not reasonable. Even industry that ostensibly agrees with it in principle.
We're working with industry. We certainly look forward to engaging with the province of Alberta in terms of how we actually make the progress that we need to. Let's not forget that climate change is a science issue, not a political issue. It's important for us to make progress on a pathway to net zero by 2050. That's not partisan. That's simply science. And so we need to ensure that we are achieving the targets that we've set out for 2030. We're focused on doing that, but we want to do that in a way that's going to recognize economic realities and ensure that we're building a strong economy for the future.
The United States is introducing its new permitting process. Is Canada ready to introduce ours, and will it be competitive?
The permitting process, you're talking about the electricity and the grid. Well, we're working obviously on a clean electricity standard, and that's part of the overarching approach. The other is actually making significant federal investments in building out a clean grid. You saw in the budget an investment tax credit for electricity that actually applies to public utilities. That is a historic investment on the part of the federal government in helping the provinces to do the things that they need to do to have abundant clean energy, which is going to be critical to building an economy.
But isn't one of money only part of the problem? Getting these projects actually approved is the bigger issue, and the United States is about to move to make that process better. Is Canada going to stay competitive?
Well, we are working on ensuring that we're expediting the process in a manner that's consistent with environmental protection and appropriately discharging our obligations to Indigenous communities. We are doing that with provinces and territories through the regional tables. We made a commitment in the budget to come forward with a new process by the end of the year, that is certainly a focus. We need to find ways to do things better, more efficiently, but we are not looking at cutting corners from an environmental perspective.
On the electrical grid, how do you convince Alberta to make the changes that you are requiring by 2035? Is it carrot? Is it stick? I don't really quite understand how you force them to change their provincial utilities.
So, look, I'm not looking to pick a fight with Alberta or with Nova Scotia or British Columbia. I'm interested in working collaboratively. At the end of the day, it is in the interests, in my view, of all of the provinces and territories to be moving very expeditiously towards a clean grid. The reason why companies like Volkswagen invested here is because of access to clean energy. That is increasingly going to be true of companies that actually want to produce hydrogen, companies that want to actually mine critical minerals and process critical minerals. It is going to be a comparative advantage. We are hearing that every day. I met with a major mining company that has operations on the prairies yesterday, and that was exactly the point that they made to me.
But other than the power of persuasion, what tools do you have? Is it money? Is it just paying for it all? Because that's the key issue that Danielle Smith raises, is the cost.
So it's partly helping the provinces with some of the costs associated with the transition. That's exactly what was included in the budget. It's also regulatory mechanisms where we are developing, for example, a clean electricity regulation that will require it. So it's working on all sides of that. But at the end of the day, you want to do this in a manner that's consensual. You want to do this in a manner that actually ensures that we move forward in a manner that's actually going to help the provinces do the things that they actually need to do that are going to benefit them.
Minister, your approach for the last couple of years, your government's approach has really, it doesn't seem to be working. We seem to be in the same situation, the same place in our relationship with Alberta. So are you going to change anything in the way you approach this file?
Well, I'm not sure we're in the same place. What I would say is it's important that we have conversations. It's certainly true in Canada, and that's historically been true, that we don't always agree on everything. I used to do federal-provincial relations for Saskatchewan. We didn't always agree with the federal government on all issues. It's important that we have those conversations to try to find common ground to ensure that we move forward. I would go back to what I said at the very beginning, which is Albertans are no different from people who live in Ontario or in British Columbia. They believe in climate change. They know it's real. They know we have to do something, but they want us to be smart about it. And I'm wanting to engage the government of Alberta about how we can work together to be smart.
But just after Marisha's question, was a situation where Saskatchewan is not going to phase out coal by 2030?
Premier Smith's comments last night saying that she expected some real challenges with the federal government going forward over things like oil and gas cap, clean electricity. She's talking about the need for the federal government to show some good faith. Do you think you're going to have a difficult time?
I think she's going to see a lot of good faith on our part. I'm encouraged by two meetings I had with her before the election. One, Jonathan Wilkinson and I spent an hour and a half in a video meeting with her, constructive, positive. I was in Calgary and met with her and her team around the healthcare discussions. Election campaigns are election campaigns. She's won a mandate as a majority government. We have every interest to collaborate with the government of Alberta on shared priorities, on things we have in common. I said to her very directly that we won't agree on everything. Let's start by focusing on the things we agree on, and let's see if we can work through the areas of disagreement.
When she talks her policies up to resulting in tens of thousands of lost jobs, tens of billions in lost investment, damage to our province's fiscal position, bringing economic hardship to Albertans, are you saying, well, that's just an election campaign, that's just politics?
It was election night. You transition from an election campaign usually in the days that follow. Your victory speech and a hard-fought election necessarily reflect some of the things that you said in the election campaign. I'm from New Brunswick. I know if you're on a boat and you slow the boat down too quickly, the wave comes in the back and can swamp the boat. These are normal parts of election campaigns. She was elected premier of an important province in our federation. I come from Atlantic Canada. The economy of Alberta is important to the economy of the whole country. Thousands of people in my riding for generations have earned their living working in Western Canada. So the success of a sustainable, growing Alberta economy is very much in the interests of the whole country. And that was my conversation with Premier Smith before the election. And I'm hoping with a few colleagues to be in Alberta possibly in the coming weeks, and look forward to meeting with her. Merci beaucoup.
Vous entendez bien avec Mme Smith, c'est ça que vous dites? C'est votre ami?
Ben, écoutez, je sais que vous, les journalistes, aiment voir mes amis parmi les premiers ministres conservateurs. J'ai passé plus de temps avec Doug Ford que Danielle Smith à date. Moi, je peux vous dire que j'ai eu des discussions avec Mme Smith avant l'élection, à deux reprises, qui étaient encourageants pour moi. On s'est mis d'accord que si elle gagnait l'élection, comme elle a fait hier soir, on allait commencer à travailler ensemble sur les enjeux où nous avons des objectifs partagés, où nous avons un terrain en commun. Moi, j'ai fait 8 campagnes électorales. Moi, une campagne électorale, c'est une période de temps. Des fois, des questions ne sont pas nécessairement diminuées en termes d'intensité dans une campagne. Ça, c'est correct. Elle a gagné. Nous sommes le gouvernement du Canada. Nous avons tous les intérêts de trouver, dans la mesure du possible, un ton qui est constructif, de travailler avec le gouvernement de l'Alberta. L'économie de l'Alberta est importante pour le Canada. Au Canada Atlantique, il y a des milliers de personnes qui gagnent leur vie. J'ai dit ça à plusieurs reprises. En travaillant dans l'Ouest canadien, alors si on peut développer avec elles une économie durable, tournée vers l'avenir en Alberta, mais c'est à bénéfice de tout le pays. Alors, moi, je ne suis pas pessimiste. J'ai hâte d'y aller probablement dans les prochaines semaines. J'espère la rencontrer en Alberta pour continuer une conversation que j'ai eue avec elle qui était encourageant il y a quelques semaines avant qu'elle a déclenché l'élection. Merci.
Question for the official language commissioner this morning. He said that basically it's your duty to improve the official languages in Air Canada, airports, and so on. What do you think of that?
Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I had a meeting with the commissioner, and we discussed his upcoming report. He briefed me on what the content of the report will be, and I thanked him for his work, and I affirmed my personal commitment and our government commitment to the principles of official languages and ensuring that Canadians who want to work or be serviced in their language of choice will be able to do so. That's why I'm really proud to support Bill C-13. Bill C-13 will give the Commissioner even more authorities to enforce and ensure that the acts that protect official languages are enforced, but we'll continue to do everything we can to ensure that those rights are protected.
This is not the first time that Air Canada has been called out for not properly providing bilingual service to Canadians. What do you think is going to be different now? Is the Bill C-13 Act going to finally solve this problem, or what more can your office do to encourage that?
Well, this is for sure. We're going to always keep reminding Air Canada and other organizations of their obligations towards Canadians. But also C-13 really provides new tools to the Commissioner that there is additional accountability when organizations do not rise to meeting their obligations under the official act. So there are new consequences that did not exist before that will ensure that organizations like Air Canada are meeting their obligations.
Do you commit to a change of culture in the transport sector? Because this is what the Commissioner is calling for.
The Commissioner and I talked about also the work that Transport Canada is doing internally, and he actually shared with me his positive observation that Transport Canada internally has improved tremendously, and we need to carry that to the broader sector. So yes, we need to work together at further enhancing the culture, reminding organizations in the transport sector how important it is that they meet those obligations. Canadians expect to be served at the language of their choice, and we need to ensure that the transport sector meets that obligation.
Great.
Thank you.
Hello. Is there any update you can give us on the fire situation in the Maritimes?
Well, we are in very close contact with both provinces of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia in particular has a significantly challenging situation. There are close to 16,000 people who have been displaced from their homes, and we're still very concerned about the fire. We are working very closely with the province to provide whatever assistance they require. There's also going to be clearly a significant amount of work done in recovery from what has transpired. And we're working with the provinces to make sure that they have the resources they need.
Any requests yet for federal assistance or military assistance?
I received a letter yesterday from Minister John Lohr from New Brunswick, not requesting assistance per se, but just sort of advising us that the damage is significant enough to initiate the process of the disaster financial assistance arrangement. And so we appreciate that, and we're communicating with them that we'll begin to work with them on those recovery funds as quickly as possible.
Any idea that we would extend the Red Cross matching fund to Maritimes?
Right now, my understanding is Nova Scotia, is providing. They've got an arrangement with the Red Cross to provide up to there's a certain amount of money to those who have been impacted. The province has not asked us to match at this point, but we're certainly open to those discussions should they request it. Thanks very much.